Ladies and gentlemen, there is a great mystery in human relationships, one that transcends culture, time, and personal experiences. It is the mystery of connection and disconnection between a man and a woman. When two people cease to communicate, something deeper than silence is at work. Silence is never neutral. It is either the result of wisdom or the evidence of a wound. It is either the sign of resolution or the symptom of unresolved tension. Tonight, I want us to take a deep journey into understanding what happens when a man and a woman do not contact each other. Because in every relationship, whether it is friendship, courtship, or marriage, communication is the lifeline. When communication is broken, something powerful is at risk. If we do not understand the reasons behind the silence, we may misinterpret its purpose. If we do not recognize its source, we may react incorrectly. Some silences are necessary. They create space for growth, reflection, and healing. Other silences are dangerous. They create distance, insecurity, and confusion. But whatever the case, silence is never just silence. It carries meaning, intention, and consequence. So let us walk together through this understanding. Let us uncover the 7 powerful reasons why a man and a woman may cease communication and how it affects their relationship. Silence as a reflection of emotional distance. When a man and a woman do not contact each other, it often reveals a deeper emotional distance that is already formed between them. Communication is the bridge that connects two hearts, and when it is absent, that bridge begins to crumble. Emotional distance does not happen overnight. It is the result of small, accumulated moments of misunderstanding, unresolved issues, and unmet expectations. When one or both individuals feel unheard or unvalued, they gradually withdraw, not always physically, but emotionally. They may still be in the same space, but they are no longer present with each other. The absence of contact can also be a way of self-preservation. Sometimes people pull away because they do not want to face the discomfort of confrontation. They fear that addressing the issue might lead to conflict, so they choose silence instead. But silence does not resolve anything. It only delays the inevitable. What is ignored today will demand attention tomorrow. Another reason for emotional distance is the loss of admiration. When a person no longer values the other as they once did, they unconsciously reduce their investment in the relationship. The things they once eagerly shared, they now keep to themselves. The conversations that used to flow effortlessly now feel forced. They stop initiating contact, not because they do not care, but because something within them has shifted. It is important to recognize that emotional distance does not always mean the end of a relationship. Sometimes it is a signal that something needs to be restored. But restoration can only happen when both individuals acknowledge the gap and make a deliberate effort to bridge it. Ignoring the distance only allows it to grow wider until eventually communication stops altogether. Understanding emotional distance requires honesty. We must ask ourselves, why am I not reaching out? Why is the other person silent? The answers to these questions can either heal the relationship or reveal that it has already ended in the heart. Silence is a test of value. When a man and a woman stop contacting each other, it often reveals how much or how little they value the relationship. Distance has a way of testing priorities. What is truly important will always receive attention, but what is taken for granted will be neglected. A lack of contact may be a sign that one person values the relationship more than the other. If one individual is always the one reaching out, initiating conversations, and maintaining the connection while the other remains passive or indifferent, silence will eventually expose the imbalance. True relationships are built on mutual investment, not one-sided effort. There are times when silence is used as a tool to measure the importance of a relationship. One person may deliberately withdraw to see if the other will notice, respond, or make an effort to reconnect. This is not always a game. Sometimes it is a genuine way of seeking clarity. If I stop calling, will they call me? If I stop texting, will they check on me? These questions reveal the unspoken doubts about where one stands in the heart of the other. In some cases, the absence of contact is a way of preserving dignity. A person who feels undervalued will eventually stop chasing after attention. They will choose silence over begging for acknowledgement. This kind of silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is an understanding that love should not have to beg to be recognized. However, silence should not always be interpreted as indifference. Sometimes, people step back because they do not know how to express their feelings or fears. They may care deeply, but they lack the emotional tools to communicate effectively. This is why patience and discernment are necessary. Not every silent person has stopped caring. Some are simply struggling with how to show it. The ultimate test of value is action. If silence lasts for too long, it becomes an answer in itself. The person who does not reach out is telling you where you stand in their life. And in such moments, the greatest wisdom is to accept the truth that silence reveals. Silence as a strategy for healing. In some situations, silence is not an enemy but a friend. It is a strategy used for healing, self-discovery, and restoration. When a man and a woman do not contact each other, it does not always mean something is wrong. Sometimes it means something is being made right within them. There are seasons in life when an individual must step away from relationships to focus on personal growth. If a person is wounded, confused, or emotionally exhausted, they may need silence to regain clarity. Constant communication can sometimes prevent necessary healing. Just as the body requires rest to recover from an injury, the heart sometimes requires solitude to regain strength. Silence also allows for reflection. When people are constantly in each other's space, they may not have the time or perspective to evaluate the health of the relationship. But when contact is removed, they can step back and ask, is this relationship truly beneficial? Are we helping or hindering each other's growth? Clarity often comes in stillness. However, healing silence must be intentional. It is not the same as avoidance or neglect. It must be communicated with honesty. I need time to process my thoughts. I need space to heal. When both individuals understand the purpose of silence, it becomes a tool for restoration rather than a source of confusion. There is also wisdom in temporary separation. Some relationships suffer because there is no space to breathe. When two people are always in close contact, small issues can become overwhelming. But when they step back for a moment, they gain perspective. What seemed like a major issue may no longer feel as significant after a period of reflection. The challenge is knowing when silence is healing and when it is harming. If silence brings peace and clarity, it is beneficial. But if it brings pain and uncertainty, then it is a signal that something needs to be addressed. The key is to use silence wisely, not as a weapon, but as a means of restoration. Silence is a sign of emotional exhaustion. When a man and a woman do not contact each other, it can often be a sign that one or both of them have reached a point of emotional exhaustion. Every relationship requires energy, mental, emotional, and sometimes even physical. When that energy is drained without being replenished, silence becomes a form of self-preservation. Emotional exhaustion does not happen suddenly. It builds over time. It is the result of repeated disappointments, misunderstandings, and unresolved conflicts. When people invest in a relationship but receive little in return, they begin to withdraw. It is not that they do not care. It is that they no longer have the strength to keep giving without being replenished. This kind of silence is particularly dangerous because it often goes unnoticed. The person withdrawing may not express their exhaustion verbally, but their actions or lack thereof speak volumes. They may stop initiating conversations, reduce their emotional engagement, and eventually choose silence over repeated efforts. One of the greatest mistakes in relationships is assuming that silence means everything is fine. Some people do not argue because they have already given up. They do not express frustration because they have lost hope that things will change. Their silence is not peace, it is resignation. When a person reaches this stage, restoring communication requires more than just words. It requires action, change, and renewed effort. Emotional exhaustion can also be caused by unresolved personal struggles. Sometimes a person pulls away not because of the relationship itself, but because they are battling internal conflicts. They may be dealing with stress, trauma, or insecurities that make it difficult for them to engage emotionally. In such cases, their silence is not rejection. It is a cry for understanding. The solution to emotional exhaustion is not to demand more communication, but to create a space where both individuals feel valued and supported. Silence must be addressed with compassion, not accusations. Instead of saying, "Why aren't you talking to me?" ask, "Are you okay? Is there something weighing on you?" The right questions can turn silence into an opportunity for healing. Silence as the result of miscommunication. One of the most common reasons a man and a woman stop contacting each other is simple miscommunication. In the absence of clarity, assumptions take over. What one person perceives as space, the other may interpret as rejection. What one sees as patience, the other may see as disinterest. Miscommunication is dangerous because it creates unnecessary distance. Two people who deeply care about each other may stop talking not because they do not want to, but because they have misread each other's actions. In many cases, silence is not intentional. It is the byproduct of unspoken thoughts and unexpressed emotions. One common cause of miscommunication is differing communication styles. Some people process their emotions internally and need time before they can talk about them. Others prefer immediate discussion to resolve issues. When these two styles clash, silence can easily be misunderstood. One person may be waiting for space while the other is waiting for reassurance. Assumptions also play a significant role. If a person expects the other to reach out first, and the other person is thinking the same way, silence becomes the result of a standoff. Neither wants to appear too eager, but neither wants to be forgotten. In the end, both lose because of a lack of clarity. Technology has further complicated communication. A delayed response to a message, a missed call, or a short reply can be misinterpreted as disinterest. People read into texts, assume meanings that were never intended, and allow minor misunderstandings to turn into unnecessary silence. The only way to overcome miscommunication is intentional conversation. Instead of assuming, ask. Instead of withdrawing, clarify. Silence should never be built on uncertainty. If both individuals are willing to communicate openly, they can turn silence into an opportunity for deeper understanding rather than unnecessary separation. Silence is a sign that the relationship has ended. Finally, there are moments when silence speaks the truth that words refuse to say. When a man and a woman no longer contact each other, it may be because the relationship has already ended in the heart, even if it has not been spoken aloud. A relationship does not die when people say goodbye. It dies when they stop trying. When conversations feel forced, when interest fades, and when communication becomes a burden rather than a joy, silence becomes the final confirmation that something has changed. Sometimes people avoid ending a relationship verbally because they fear confrontation. Instead of having a difficult conversation, they allow distance to create the separation for them. They stop reaching out, hoping the other person will get the message. But silence does not bring closure. It only prolongs the inevitable. There are also situations where one person moves on emotionally while the other is still holding on. The person who has moved on becomes distant, disengaged, and eventually silent. Meanwhile, the other person waits, hoping the silence is temporary. But waiting for someone who has already emotionally left is like waiting for a train that will never arrive. Recognizing when silence means finality is important for emotional well-being. If communication has stopped and efforts to reconnect are met with indifference, it is a sign that the relationship has reached its natural conclusion. Holding on to something that no longer exists only leads to unnecessary pain. Silence can be painful, but it can also be liberating. It can serve as a clear sign that it is time to move forward. Instead of waiting in uncertainty, it is wiser to accept what silence is saying. This chapter has ended. And sometimes accepting that truth is the first step toward a new beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, silence is never empty. It carries meaning, intention, and consequence. When a man and a woman do not contact each other, something deeper is happening beneath the surface. Whether it is emotional distance, a test of value, a need for healing, or the painful end of a relationship, silence is always speaking. The question is, are we willing to listen? Understanding silence is the key to wisdom in relationships. It teaches us when to pursue, when to be patient, and when to let go. But above all, it reminds us that true connection is not built on absence. It is built on presence, effort, and intentional communication. Let us never allow silence to replace the words that need to be spoken.